Ali, we have seen two different stories in this, video. There is one that is Milvik, and then there is the other, which is Mizan. And both of them, you say that have, been enabled digitally. So how do you do this? How does this work? It does not seem like a situation where, one size fits all. So how does different solutions and different problems come together?
Sure, Andali, thank you. And thank you, DX Summit, for the opportunity. Let me start off by saying that my mother always wanted me to be a doctor. I never had the talent or the brains, but now wearing a mask and gloves, I certainly feel like one. So, Ami, this one's for you. Digitalization is, you talked about how one size doesn't fit all. It does and it doesn't. And that's the beauty of digital, because digital breaks it down, and there's lots of techies much more qualified than I am in this room. It breaks it down into zeros and ones. And that makes customization very easy. So I think it is both. Digital is complicating in that you have to create bespoke elements for different customers. But because the data lake and the insights that Fatima talked about, that data gives you, that decision-making, that customization is actually not a problem. So that's the journey Jazz has been on, and that's what we promise to our customers.
We talk about a lot of digital, revolutions and how businesses should be enabled and how, everything should, keep abreast with, changing times. But does it make sense for every company? How does digitalization impact productivity and profitability?
Let me answer that by saying that digitalization is a lot like COVID, the pandemic. It's not a question of if you're going to get it, it's a question of when. So honestly, digitalization, at least from our perspective, the best day was when you say when, the best day was yesterday. And I think all questions about productivity, revenue, obviously, every opportunity needs to be assessed on a business case. In my opinion, the business case for most digitalization efforts now is fairly positive. And again, the beauty of that is that you can do that in stages. You don't have to convert your entire business digital overnight, but you look at the most critical elements that allow themselves to digitalization the quickest and will allow an incremental value gain the most. And then you start on that journey. But as you said, when should you get into it? Honestly, yesterday or better than that day before yesterday.
So a lot of businesses were forced to basically turn to digital because of the pandemic. But in the case of Milvik, at least it was there. But in the case of Mizan, and in the case of Lambda, and in the case of many other companies that Jazz Business is working with, they have actually chosen to do digital transformation even regardless of the fact that the pandemic has hit the global. How do you think a company realizes that now it is the time to change? Sure. Now, factoring out the pandemic situation.
So I'll give you the example of Jazz itself. Jazz has been on a transformation journey from a telco, a connectivity provider, to a solutions provider. And I think the lines, there's some, world-leading companies of solution providers in this room who've been on this journey for very long. They, of course, didn't do the telco bit, and the telcos didn't do the solutions provision. I think those lines, again, courtesy digitalization, are blurring. So Jazz started on this journey about 4 years ago when we merged with Varid, and that gave us some opportunities to reflect and look at the synergies, and we felt that the timing and opportunity was right. So each sector, each company has to decide where on that inflection point, that journey, they are. And we felt that by continuing to be a telecom operator, we were basically getting our lunch and dinner and breakfast stolen by over-the-top companies. We could have stayed in that position for another 20, 25 years with depleting revenues, but still maybe a profitable business. But my belief, and I think it's something that Jim Collins wrote on Good to Great, where good businesses or great businesses change from positions of strength. Jazz is the market leader, and we felt that if we need to change, we need to change now. And I think if you look at the performances of Jazz compared to its competitors over the last 4 years, that was the right bet.
There are different sizes of companies. There are large corporations, there are multinationals, then there are SMEs, and then there are startups as well. A revolution of digital or digitalization completely is a, a very expensive process, I would say. I mean, of course, it is going to cut cost eventually, but initially, when you have to, transform, it is with some cost. So, what advice would you give to the companies who are doing their cost-benefit analysis and are choosing not to go digital at this point in time because they're still surviving, they're still making money?
So absolutely, Atalib, there is a business case. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And going digital, I think it's honestly the costs now of going digital are not so much, but it's the opportunity cost of dispensing with your existing systems that businesses are reluctant to part ways with. But I think more than that, it's the familiarity of running the business in a specific manner. And Fatma mentioned about a holistic strategy. For me, digitalization, I think one of the biggest lessons we learned certainly is that it's not a mechanical process. We talk about looking at the whole thing holistically. I think a lot of people ignore the softer side of this transformational change, which is equally, if not more important than going digital. So companies need to do both. They need to, of course, evaluate what makes sense for them, but similarly look at the softer side of what that paradigm shift is going to bring. A lot of companies transform digitally in processes, but are unable to handle the consequences or fallout of that in their organization.
All right. So from the case studies that we saw, Mizan was distributing devices, and they wanted, management of those devices and data security. From Milvik, we saw that they wanted to virtualize their call center. So from what I see in these stories, there is a specific segment or a specific function of their organization that they're digitizing. And maybe some of the functions are not actually catching up to it. So they needed to do it because of the pandemic, so they did it. But how does it work in the long run if one function is performing digitally and the other is not catching up?
So I think it's a complication, but it's not a showstopper. Certainly, companies have had ERP systems for the longest time, but not necessarily customer management tools. But the businesses work. You just take a manual output from one automated or digital system, and then you can feed it into the next system. It's not ideal, and there's chances for human error, but it can be done. So I don't think you have to sort of swallow the whole elephant in one go, but it helps, and obviously it depends on your priorities.
What do you think is the biggest mistake companies make when they are trying to transform themselves digitally?
Yeah, so I think I already alluded to that. I think a lot of people and companies ignore the softer part of that. I can share at Jazz, when we went digital, we did not take into account the fact that there were mid-level managers who had done the job in a certain manner with certain tools for up to 2 decades. And suddenly you've taken away those tools from them, given them new tools, and said, continue performing the way you've done with these new tools, with much more transparency, with things that they were not really used to doing. And again, there wasn't resentment or reluctance or hesitation. We just did not equip them well enough to deal with what happened once they started going digital. So addressing the softer sides of this whole digital journey is an absolutely critical ingredient for success.
So we talk about, digitizing organizations and how they can make themselves profitable and productive through doing that. But do you think there is any impact on the society at large when organizations start, adopting digitalization?
Again, digital, it just makes everything available. Jazz does 2 billion transactions a day. Now, till a few months ago, we did not have the ability to do anything with that data lake. We have since developed a data analytics team, and every day, a business that I've been involved with 4 years, I tell you, every day I get a new insight based on data that makes me think, that's interesting, I didn't really think about that. So the ability of going digital and the consequences and the insights that you get just make it a no-brainer that companies need to look at that, reduce wastage, identify where the pain points are exactly, and optimize your processes.
So before we move ahead, I'd like to remind our online audiences that they can log into sli.do, use the code DX21, and start sending their comments for Ali. Ali, can you tell me what are the 3 key takeaways that we should take out of this conversation today? What you would like the audience to remember?
So I think, Andalib, let's start off by saying that digital transformation is not an option. I think I've said that earlier, and I think that'll be one of the key takeaways from a lot of the conversations that you'll hear over the next couple of days. The second thing is that you need to focus on the softer side of it that I talked about. And I think, honestly, from my personal experience, the third thing is that digital is going to make you much more agile, but you need to do it with speed. Digitalization is not something you do incrementally. So it's both a reason to do it quickly, and you will make mistakes, but you learn quickly, you fail quickly, and you move on quickly. That's the power of digital. And honestly, the speed and agility it now gives even traditional businesses to reorient as consumer perceptions change, as consumers' behavior change. Just take the example of COVID. Companies that were digitally enabled, I think, and I don't have data points, but I'm sure if I did, that will back up what I'm saying next. Their ability to transition to managing COVID and the pandemic would have been much better than to businesses who were not digitally enabled. And we have some case studies that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure if you ran a survey, that would be the conclusion.
So there is a question that says, how are you leveraging digital transformation to gain cloud customers for your data farm?
So listen, as I said, Jazz gets 2 billion transactions a day, so getting more data is not an incentive to launch cloud. But we felt that an onshore cloud is the right time now to do that, because with data privacy and data secrecy concerns, a lot of organizations in Pakistan are not moving to the cloud, which has a positive business case in most cases because of the offshore cloud. So we felt that the opportunity was there. We're not the first. There are other onshore clouds. But again, with Jazz's 70 million subscriber network, we felt that we could really leverage the opportunity. So Jazz Cloud is there. It started. We'll be launching it commercially in a couple of weeks, actually.
That's great. So how should people look at skill development? Because times are changing. There's a lot that needs to be unlearned and relearned. So how do you think the skill development should take place? How should people evolve themselves to match the requirements of the industry?
Again, it's going to vary for individuals in the sectors, but honestly, change is the only constant. Personally, I'm on my 4th career. And it's not because I'm not very good at whatever I do and I get fired, but I just feel that I needed to grow. And to do that, I ended up shifting careers. So everyone has to take it upon themselves. It's never too late to learn. Digital now makes it very easy. You can take Harvard courses sitting in your bedroom. What else do you need? And honestly, I'm not a digital native. My children are. And if I need to be relevant for them, I need to understand how they think and operate. Digital is really the only option for me.
A lot of companies are not there yet. They're still operating on the olden ways, and they're still not catching up to the digitalization that is required. We have seen a lot of businesses going out of business during the pandemic due to this as well. So how do you cater to this problem? How do you take them along with the digital journey that Jazz follows and they don't?
That's a real tough one, and at Jazz, we've been trying for the last 4 or 5 years, ever since we embarked on this journey, to convince our customers of the value of going digital. There's been some traction, but people looked at cost, but more importantly, I think the inertia of just doing what you're doing, and if it ain't broke, why fix it? That mentality has prevailed. Honestly, COVID has done that job for us better than we were doing, and it's given a real impetus to businesses because they kind of ran out of solutions. My advice to businesses is tell us what your business pain points are. We may not have the solution ready, but we certainly have the means to try and find that solution together with you. And that's really the journey we've embarked on, where our salespeople that used to be called key account managers have now been rebranded to be Jazz Business Consultants. And the idea is that we go to our customers and say, what are your solution pain points? Whether it's connectivity, whether it's content, and how can we help? And I think an earlier presentation talked about we don't intend to do everything in-house. We've got brilliant partners that we will work with to provide that solution to our customers.
All right. Ali, I think we are, towards the end of our conversation. So there's just one comment that I'm going to share with you, and I'd like you to share your, thoughts about that. So the tone at the top, setting digital targets, process re-engineering to enable digitalization, and capacity building of stakeholders. It seems like a lot, but what do you think about it?
Absolutely. I think, again, if I look at our experience at Jazz, the leadership team, once we took that decision, we lived, breathed, preached digital every day. We challenged ourselves, we challenged our teams, and that tone at the top is so critical. Not that, if the boss does it, everyone else will follow. But I think intelligent repetition, especially because we've got day jobs. Remember, digitalization is very few people's day job in an organization. They still have to sell whatever they're selling. And I think that intelligent repetition and reminder of this journey that we're on, and there were frustrating times, and that's where, again, the tone on the top is very helpful because it continues to provide that support that people will need through what is clearly going to be a very disruptive process.
Thank you so much, Ali, for coming here and gracing us with your presence and sharing your knowledge with us. I hope a lot of people over here must have, taken your learnings and they will apply some of them in their organizations as well. We are now going to say goodbye to Jazz Business with the last video, seeing what else Jazz Business has to offer the entire industry. Thank you so much, Ali.
Thank you.